So the BRICS Economic Alliance,
Yeah.
it's just had this massive expansion, basically doubling its membership. You're probably hearing a lot about how this could, shake up the global balance of power, the whole international order we're used to. We've pulled together quite a few sources looking at the history, the goals, and maybe what the future holds for this growing group, just to give you a clearer picture.
Exactly. Today, we're really going to dive deep into the BRICS Alliance. We want to try and understand what's really driving them, what this doubling in size might mean, and maybe what internal issues are going to be important for their future path.
Yeah, and to do that, we're looking at, analysis of the new development bank, what its goals are, also different takes on whether this expansion shows strength or maybe some, weaknesses, and how China and India see it, because, let's be honest, they don't seem completely aligned.
All right.
Plus, BRICS' efforts to move away from relying so much on the U.S. dollar. Our mission here is basically to pull out the key insights from all this, cut through the noise, really, without drowning you in information.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Where did this whole BRICS thing even start?
Well, the term BRIC, BRC, it was actually coined way back in 2001 by Jim O'Neill. He was an economist at Goldman Sachs. And he pointed to Brazil, Russia, India, and China as, major emerging economies. He looked at things like their GDP growth, how fast things were growing, GDP per capita, population size, key metrics, really.
And it wasn't just like an interesting economic footnote, was it? O'Neill apparently suggested the G7 needed to bring these countries in for global policymaking to actually work properly. It was kind of recognizing that the world economic map was changing.
Precisely. And the BRIC countries themselves, they felt this too. They were getting bigger economically, but felt their voice in the existing international system wasn't really matching up. They saw a need for some kind of organization, something to better represent their size and push for their interests globally.
Right. So it seems the idea caught on pretty fast.
Right.
Heads of state started meeting in 2008. Then the first official BRIC summit was in Russia in 2009. That feels like a quick jump from a concept to, world leaders meeting.
It really was. And their goals were ambitious right from the get-go. They were exploring how to build a real alternative, something different to the existing international system, the one largely set up after World War II by the West. Talk included new financial institutions, even maybe down the road, a new reserve currency. Then 2010, South Africa joins the party, and it officially becomes BRICS with the S. We even have this image from April 2011, the third summit in China. You see all the leaders. Rousseff from Brazil, Medvedev from Russia, Singh from India, Hu Jintao from China, and Jacob Zuma from South Africa. That really sealed it.
What's interesting, too, is how the term BRIC and then BRICS just took off. Not just politically, but like multinational companies started using it.
Yeah.
It felt more, accurate or less loaded than older terms like developing world or emerging markets, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so. It signaled something new. And these yearly summits, starting back in 2009, they've been really crucial. It's where they coordinate on their global economic roles, figure out their stances in other big organizations. They've basically been trying to build this alternative structure piece by piece. So what were the main drivers? Why did they feel they needed this alternative system so strongly?
Well, a big thing seems to be feeling underrepresented in the big global bodies. Our sources point out, like Russia and China have veto power on the UN Security Council, sure, but there's no permanent seat for anyone from Africa or Latin America.
And it goes beyond the Security Council, too. Look at the IMF and the World Bank. The U.S. has huge influence there, holds a massive share of the voting power in both. So naturally, questions come up about whose interests are really being prioritized.
Right. And it wasn't just about voting power, was it? Some BRICS countries looked at things the U.S. did, like the 2003 Iraq invasion, and saw them as, breaking international law, which kind of highlighted this perceived double standard, maybe, within the system the U.S. helped build.
Absolutely. And then you've got the U.S. dollar. Its dominance as the world's reserve currency gives the U.S. this power to slap sanctions on countries unilaterally. That's definitely hit countries like China and Russia. So our sources say getting away from that dollar dependence, maybe finding an alternative, is a clear priority for BRICS. Okay, so that's the background and the why. Let's shift to what's happening right now. This huge expansion, doubling the members. What exactly went down?
Right. So at their summit in Johannesburg, South Africa, last August 2023, the leaders invited 6 new countries: Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. That's a big jump. What does this bigger BRICS look like now, globally speaking?
Well, with these new members, BRICS represents something like 42% of the world's population and around 36% of global GDP. That's That's a significant slice of both the world's people and its economy.
And it sounds like the queue might be getting longer. I read loads of other countries are interested too.
That's right. Sources mention over 40 countries have shown interest in joining, which really tells you something, doesn't it? It suggests this idea of an alternative international setup has wide appeal. Some commentators are even saying this expansion could be a turning point, signaling a move away from Western dominance towards a more multipolar world.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating because this expansion, while it's a big statement, it also brings pretty big challenges.
Challenges? Like what kind of problems does getting bigger create?
Well, the expanded group now has to deal with an even more complex mix of political rivalries. Some pretty old ones, big economic differences between members too, and they never really had a strong single ideology binding them together. Adding more diverse countries could actually make those existing issues trickier. Take China and Russia. Okay, they're working together more lately, mostly driven by trade and, let's face it, opposition to the U.S. But historically, they've had border disputes. They're still potential rivals. Just last August, China put out a map showing Bolshoi Ussuriski Island as theirs, kind of ignoring a deal they made with Russia back in 2004. Things like that can cause friction.
Wow, yeah, that's pretty direct. What about India in all this? How do they see it?
Well, India also has its long-running border dispute with China, and they're competing for influence across Asia. So India's been worried, understandably, that bringing in too many countries seen as close to China might water down India's own clout within BRICS. Actually, India pushed to talk about membership rules before they expanded, which shows that cautious approach. So yeah, getting bigger boosts the bloc's overall weight, but it might also dilute the influence of some key original members.
So it's not just a simple case of bigger is better then. What about the new members? Any baggage there?
Oh, yeah. Even among the new invitees, you've got history. Saudi Arabia and the UAE, for example, they've had their own regional rivalries. Trying to get consensus from such a diverse group with sometimes competing interests, that's going to be a major hurdle. We saw a glimpse of this, apparently, at a recent BRICS foreign ministers meeting in Brazil. They couldn't agree on a joint statement, although they did find common ground on trade and tariffs, supposedly. But it shows how hard forging a truly united front can be. But they have set up some concrete things, haven't they, like the new development bank?
Yeah, the NDB. That was set up in 2015. It was a big deal, meant to fund infrastructure in BRICS countries and other developing nations. And I think the figures are around, what, $32 billion US dollars in projects funded so far. And the idea was for the NDB to be a bit different, right? Not just another World Bank.
Exactly. It aimed to stand apart, like doing more business in local currencies, setting its own compliance rules, trying to be an alternative to those traditional Western-led institutions. But reality check, it hasn't quite revolutionized global finance the way some hoped. Partly because it still needs foreign investment, right? And that money is still tied into the existing global economic order. We saw this play out in March 2022. The NDB had trouble getting hold of about $1.8 billion in Russian funds because of the sanctions on Russia. So while it wants to be an alternative, it's still kind of linked to the Western financial system because it needs international funding.
So outside forces can still really affect it. What's next for the NDB then?
Well, looking ahead, the expectation is that at the next BRICS summit in 2024, the NDB will roll out a proper strategy for climate change and the energy transition. It should spell out what kinds of projects it'll fund, what financial tools it'll offer developing countries for these huge challenges, finding more diverse funding sources, boosting support for clean energy that could be really key for BRICS members trying to adapt to climate change while keeping the lights on and developing sustainably. Now, another huge topic swirling around BRICS is de-dollarization. What's that really about, and what are they actually doing to use the dollar less?
Right. De-dollarization.
Yeah.
Basically, trying to rely less on the U.S. dollar for international trade and finance. And given all the geopolitical stuff going on, plus some of the new BRICS invitees, Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, facing actual dollar shortages, we are seeing more use of local currencies, especially the Chinese renminbi, it seems. But let's be real, the dollar still runs the show globally, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It dominates global cross-border payments, no question. The renminbi's use has grown, yes, but it's mostly in transactions that involve China directly. Trade with Russia has also pushed renminbi use up a bit. So while these local currency initiatives are happening, changing the whole global system away from the dollar, that's a massive long-term challenge, not something that happens overnight.
So China's really pushing this. What have they done specifically to get the renminbi used more internationally?
Well, China's been busy building the plumbing, you could say. They've set up renminbi clearing banks in different countries. They've got bilateral currency swap lines with various central banks, including some BRICS members and invitees. And back in 2015, they launched CPS, the cross-border interbank payment system. Think of it as an alternative payment messaging system to SWIFT, designed to make cross-border renminbi deals smoother.
And are other BRICS members getting on board with similar ideas?
Yeah, some are starting to. Brazil, for instance, greenlit its first renminbi clearing bank last year, 2023. They've got a bank directly participating in CIPS now. They even did their first trade deal directly using Brazilian real and Chinese renminbi. And the renminbi is now over 5% of Brazil's foreign reserves, up from basically nothing just a few years back. That's quite a shift. India is also trying to boost the rupee for cross-border trade. They're looking into currency swaps, local currency settlement deals, like they have one with the UAE and are talking to Saudi Arabia.
Okay, so there's movement, but it sounds like it's not really happening evenly across all the BRICS countries.
That's a really key point. Compared to the renminbi, other BRICS currencies like the South African rand haven't seen nearly as much change in their share of global payments. The UAE dirham and Saudi riyal have seen some growth in trade finance, sure, but they started from a very low base. And there are real hurdles for wider use of other BRICS currencies. Worries about convertibility, how much their value swings around, especially for the rupee, the real, the rand. Plus, the economies and financial systems in places like Brazil and South Africa are just smaller. And for Russia, well, sanctions make using the ruble internationally very difficult.
It does sound like those dollar shortages you mentioned, the ones some new members have, might actually push them towards these alternatives faster, though.
That's definitely possible. As we said, some invitees are really struggling with dollar access and high inflation. That could make alternatives look much more attractive out of necessity. There are even reports that Argentina used that currency swap line with China to make a payment to the IMF, using yuan instead of dollars.
Still, even with all that, it sounds like creating a serious challenger to the dollar's global dominance is a huge uphill battle.
It really is a very long road. Thinking about a single BRICS currency replacing the dollar, that faces massive hurdles. You'd need incredible political and economic alignment among all these diverse members. And right now, the dollar is just so deeply embedded in global trade. Now, we touched on this before, but let's just circle back quickly to the different views on the expansion itself. It sounds like not everyone in the original club was equally keen.
No, definitely not. China and Russia generally were eager to expand quickly. They see it as a way to boost their influence among developing countries, many of which look to BRICS as a way to get closer to China economically.
But India had reservations.
Yes, India's been more wary. The main concern, as we discussed, is their own influence getting diluted if the group gets packed with countries seen as leaning towards China. Given the ongoing tensions between India and China, that's a big deal for them. So for India, expansion is kind of a mixed bag, more collective clout, maybe, but potentially less individual sway relative to Beijing.
Right, so it's this constant balancing act, trying to grow the bloc's overall power while key members worry about their own standing within it.
Exactly. And these different perspectives on expansion will probably keep shaping how the BRICS alliance develops. Okay, let's try and pull this all together. What are the main takeaways from our deep dive into BRICS?
Well, first, the BRICS alliance now represents a huge chunk of the world's population and economy. That's undeniable. And it's clearly driven by this shared desire for a different kind of global order, more multipolar, less Western-dominated. The recent expansion definitely shows there's growing interest worldwide in that alternative vision.
But it's not exactly a smooth ride to becoming a new global superpower bloc, is it?
No, far from it. You've got these deep internal splits, political rivalries, different economic situations and goals, plus the sheer difficulty of actually challenging the established global financial system. All these things are pretty major roadblocks to BRICS acting as a truly unified, transformative force.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. With all these built-in challenges and competing interests inside this bigger BRICS, is this growth going to make it a stronger, more influential bloc that can actually act together? Or could the very things pushing its expansion, this search for an alternative, end up making it harder for them to act as one coherent force on the world stage? And maybe more importantly, what signs should you be watching for to figure out how this will actually impact your world down the line?